right, everybody, welcome back to the fourth video in this demo series that was given at MNears, or the first annual MNears, if I want to be a little bit more specific. So this is the final video, and we are going to go over principles of an effective warm-up. And the question we're trying to answer here is, how can we use real-time SmO₂ response to monitor if an athlete or a participant is truly warmed up? And I want to start by asking you as the audience a question. Do all athletes need the same warm up? As a researcher, this is a tough question to answer, because I think as a coach, we would say no. Athletes, all athletes need different warm ups, because some athletes take longer to warm up, other athletes need higher intensity to warm up, those sort of things. But from a research perspective, I think a lot of the times a warm up is placed probably in like one of the bottom rungs of importance in terms of exercise physiology, exercise physiology research, where a lot of the times we see the same warm up being used, and it's really just a mention of you know, individuals did the same. Let's see. Following a standard 5-minute standardized warm up period, participants exercised for 5 minutes with a 30-second rest. And I'm specifically calling out individuals that I've worked with in the past, and not to pick on them, but just to use examples of people like I've worked really closely with, including myself, which I've highlighted here. Where we just use, kind of a standard warm up, and it's just kind of to say, yep, we did a warm up, and then we went on about our day. We did our actual exercise intensities. So what I'm proposing here is, as opposed to using the standardized warm up, we should use NIRS to physiologically individualize a warm up. And this is something that I think it's going to be a little bit challenging to implement. But if performance is our outcome, our study outcome, then we want to make sure that an individual is truly warmed up so they can get the best performance out of themselves on any given day. So we can start to minimize the idea that, oh, well, maybe the warm up was actually the issue. So maybe these people who didn't do as well on their time trials didn't have as adequate of a warm up compared to others. But those are questions that we still don't have the answer to. So this is also kind of me asking you as researchers to maybe consider starting to try to implement differences in warm-ups. I mean, I think I'll talk about this later, but I think this is a perfect place to have like an exercise physiology class do a standard warm-up, your 5 minutes at 55% VO2 max, 5 minutes at 65% VO2 max, and then do a time trial, versus what I'm going to propose in just a few minutes of, kind of like a NIRS-based warm-up, and then have them do a time trial and see if there's any meaningful differences. And who knows, maybe there isn't, but we don't know the answer to that quite yet. So I'm proposing to all of you, maybe this is a decent, easy study idea that could potentially be used, for an exercise phys class, or, master's thesis, or maybe even a PhD thesis, if somebody is interested in warm-up effect. So the goal of a NIRS-based warm-up is to achieve the highest resting SmO₂ without inducing fatigue. And the big thing here is without inducing fatigue. You can really easily elevate your SmO₂ if you go and do a 30-second Wingate test. Your SmO₂ will be extremely high, because you just created a boatload of metabolic byproducts that are going to vasodilate and get a lot of blood to the area, and you're going to increase heart rate very, very, very high. So you're going to have a lot of oxygen being delivered, and a lot of oxygen being able to actually enter the area of the muscle. So you're going to get SmO₂ to be really, really high following something like a Wingate test. But I will say that following a Wingate test, you'll probably be pretty tired. So the key here is that you want to balance that fatigue with increasing SmO₂ as much as you can. And by increasing SmO₂ as much as you can, you're essentially creating a bigger battery for your muscle. If you start with higher SmO₂ levels, then you're going to have a longer or a larger area to deplete that oxygen before you start to run into challenges. So the way that I approach warm up is in two stages. The first stage is the cardiovascular preparation stage. That's just what I'm calling it at this point. Um, and the first thing we need to do is we need to get the cardiovascular system warmed up and delivering adequate blood flow to the working muscle. And typically, heart rate takes 3 to 5 minutes to respond to exercise. And what we need to what we need to do is we need to elevate our heart rate and our cardiovascular system to deliver enough oxygen without going too hard. Because if we go too hard immediately upon a warm up, what we'll see, especially if we look at the near signal, is that SmO₂ goes down and then it just stays really, really low. Um, and the key here is that we want to increase heart rate, increase blood flow, and then SmO₂ should go down and then either stay flat or potentially go up. If you have a locked in exercise intensity, then you could generally see upon a good warm up SmO₂ actually trickle back up. What we'll see in just a second is that my power output actually goes up, but my SmO₂ stays the same. And then after that is a muscle preparation stage where the second thing we need to do is we need to drive oxygen utilization by engaging higher power outputs using intervals. And the goal is to maximize muscle blood flow. And in order to actually do this, we actually have to create some level of stress coming from the muscle because, again, those metabolites are going to allow for vasodilation, activation of those capillaries, vasodilation within the muscle and the larger vessels, and it's going to send stress signals that's actually going to then increase heart rate as well. So it's kind of a two-pronged system here where we do cardiovascular prep, which is really easy portion, and then a muscle prep, which is trying to increase the dynamic range of SmO₂ through exercise intensities that are generally higher and either short in nature or a little bit longer but lower intensity. And then there's also this idea potentially that from a standardized SmO₂ warm up, you might be able to start to get indications of training readiness following this warm up. But we'll talk about that in just a second. So let's dive a little bit deeper. So the cardiovascular preparation phase is typically easy riding or running, designed to increase the heart rate and cardiac output to deliver more blood to the muscles without creating too much stress on the muscle. And this typically takes 10 to 15 minutes. Heart rate will come up, like I said, in about 5. Then you can increase heart rate, or then you can increase exercise intensity a little bit more. Heart rate will come up a little bit more. You'll be delivering more muscle or more oxygen to the muscle. And what you are looking for is kind of a net positive increase in muscle oxygenation or SmO₂, which is indicative that the cardiovascular system is actually delivering more oxygen to the muscle than the muscle is demanding. Then after that, we go into the muscle preparation phase, which is a series of harder work intervals designed to increase oxygen demand. And then upon full rest, increase resting SmO₂. And there's really kind of two ways that I've seen people do this effectively in the past. The first one is doing something like 1 to 2 sets of 1 to 2 minutes at second threshold, and then full rest until SmO₂ reaches a high. And this full rest is really important because a lot of the times rest is considered 25 watts on the bike or walking on a treadmill. But what we found is that just to standardize everything, stopping with your leg in an upright position, like this individual on the screen here, actually gives us a more controlled, better indication of when SmO₂ reaches a peak. Another way of doing this is doing 3 to 5, 20 to 30-second accelerations of increasing intensities with full SmO₂ rest in between. So you do your acceleration, and really it's somewhere along the lines of 20 to 30 seconds. But what I like to do is use SmO₂ to dictate my work and my rest. So SmO₂ starts pretty high. I accelerate, SmO₂ goes down in that rapid phase of decrease, and then it transitions to kind of a slow SmO₂ decrease or steady state. It's that elbow, that bending effect, that is where I actually stop my acceleration, and then I rest again, full rest. So leg in the upright position, let SmO2 come up as high as possible. Once it's reached its peak, then I can start my second acceleration. And I repeat these intervals until I get two subsequent SmO2 values that are similar in height. So, for example, I get them up to 75% and then 75% on the next one. I know I'm warmed up and ready to go. And this is kind of what it looks like. So, during the cardiovascular preparation phase, we see heart rate is going up, and we actually see power output going up as well. And this is what I was saying, is that if power output was actually maintained at a steady state here, then SmO2 would actually probably be increasing. But because power output is actually increasing during this, SmO2 is remaining steady. And then when I go to the muscle prep portion, we can see that my accelerations are somewhere along the lines of like pretty high, 490, then 400, or then 550, then almost 600 watts. But it's for a fairly short period of time, and it only is until I see that bending of that SmO2. So SmO2 will go down really rapidly, and then all of a sudden it'll be, down to 19 or something like that, or maybe like 13 on a good day, and then it'll be 13, 12, 11, 11. And then that's when I know when to let off and actually do a full rest. And you can see my heart rate is actually increasing on each subsequent interval after this as well. So this pull of oxygenation is creating a systemic change in my heart rate, which is then allowing for over delivery of oxygen on subsequent rest periods, and then SmO2 is increasing from there. So now the question is, well, what if we repeat a warm up over and over and over again? Can we actually use this for readiness purposes? And something that we've been contemplating and would love for somebody to actually, test empirically, is this idea that doing a standard warm up and then measuring the minimum and the maximum of the final interval every single day to get a dynamic range. So, for example, this one is 62.3, and then collect that every single day. As you can see, I accidentally went a little bit longer with my second warm up in terms of my cardiovascular prep phase, but I still did three intervals, and we see that I went from 62.3 to 63.8, which I don't think is a meaningful difference. Both of these days, I actually felt really good, and they were after adequate rest and other things like that. So this is not an example of when I would actually change my training, but what we see when individuals get fatigued, including myself, is that this dynamic range gets kind of smushed. It gets smaller. So the lowest low would be, somewhere along the lines of maybe like 20 or 30, and the highest high might be down to 65. So that changes that dynamic range from like 63.8 to something in perhaps the 30s. And what I think would be best is to track the dynamic range over time, and then take like a 7-day moving average, and then compare your 7-day moving average to what your daily average is, or your daily number is. And then if that's outside of a certain amount of, say standard deviations or some statistical number that you come up with, then you can start to make decisions. Oh, should I do a hard workout today, or should I do an easy workout today? And then kind of go from there. So that's kind of where I think you could probably use the standard SmO2 warm up. And the cool thing about just dictating a warm up by SmO2 is that the power will follow or won't follow, and motivation also from a psychological perspective may or may not, or will impact this as well. If your legs feel heavy, it's going to be a lot harder for you to push harder and get that SmO2 down lower. So, the mental drive, as well as the power output or the mechanical data, should take into account what is being seen in terms of your SmO2 as well. So the two questions that we were really answering here is our athlete warmed up? And the question then becomes, have we achieved the highest SmO2 that athlete can achieve on that day without fatiguing them? Um, and this is how I would really love people to approach warm-ups if it's possible going forward from a research perspective. And then another question we have is, are they ready for training? Is my athlete ready for training? So does the athlete's muscle oxygen indicate that they are actually ready to train? Is their dynamic range higher, lower, or is it the same as it normally would be? And does that actually indicate that they are ready or not ready to train? So we think that these ideas really represent potential study and educational opportunities for people in your labs, people in your classes, those sort of things, to really start to see and get their hands on nears, and especially looking at muscle oxygen saturation, because the muscle is really driving your performance ultimately. The muscle is what's required for the force production to occur. And if the muscle is tired, or if the muscle isn't warmed up adequately, then potentially, or perhaps, the performance metrics won't be met on that given day. So I give all this information away to you because I don't have a research lab or anything like that, but I would be more than happy to discuss these sort of ideas and how they could potentially be used for both study purposes or educational purposes. If you're interested, have some master students, maybe have some classes that you're trying to implement MOXY or other NIRS devices with, please reach out to me. As always, my email is Philip, PHILIP, at moxymonitor.com. And I would be more than happy to talk to you about all of this sort of stuff. Uh, any questions? Any questions can be directed just to that email. Again, Philip, PHILIP, at moxymonitor.com.